This is Summer Lynn from Chicago, Illinois. Just wanted to give a huge shout out to the Relay for all the love and support they've given my team and I. And make sure you stay tuned for all the latest boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, it appears that the former WBO super featherweight champion Eva Bromicka is going to be returning to action on March 13th on a Timex promotion card over there in her native Poland against an opponent that has yet to be announced. No word on whether or not the relationship still exists between Eva and the people over there at Matchroom, but I want to say that for Eva, this is a step in the right direction. The sooner she gets back out there,
Joins the party.
the better. The sooner she gets back out there, the sooner she can rebound off that decision loss to Mikaela Mayer. Mikaela, who took Eva Bromicka's WBO title. Listen, Eva isn't a bad fighter. She has her drawbacks. She has her limitations. She has areas that she needs to work on.
Like any other fighter.
We'll admit that Eva Bromicka doesn't have the most fan-friendly style that makes for the most entertainment value, the most high-octane matchups. She doesn't. She really is more maestro than maverick, more finesse than ferocity, but better still, she has ability.
She does.
And she doesn't have a bad pro record. A record of 19 wins, only 1 loss with 2 knockouts. Some might argue that perhaps there should be 1 or 2 more losses on there, but better still, she's not a bad fighter. And there still is a place for Eva Bromicka in today's super featherweight division, assuming she's going to continue to campaign there. We don't know who Eva's going to be fighting or at what weight she's going to be fighting.
We don't.
That's what we don't know here and now. I think it's possible that maybe Eva so decides to move up to the lightweight division, perhaps sees about lining herself up for a Katie Taylor fight, a Katie Taylor payday, I should say. Given what's going on in the super featherweight division, it's not likely that Eva picks up a title from any one of those guys. There are great matchups there for Eva, intriguing opponents, and those opponents may yield some opportunities, but Eva, being 36 years old here today, I wonder if she's going to make another world title run at super featherweight, or will she so decide to move up to lightweight and see about lining herself up for a Katie Taylor fight? You know what? By the time she does, she could be 37 years old. You know, she's an aging fighter. She looks fantastic for her age.
Delicious.
But I highlight Eva Bromicka's age not because of aesthetic quality or aesthetic value, but because of what that means for the rest of her career. She's not getting any younger, and how that might affect what moves she decides to make moving forward. You just suffered your first professional loss. You're not as young as you used to be. So do you continue to gamble with the hungry young lions of the super featherweight division, or do you prepare yourself to rebuild and go for one last hoorah against, a Katie Taylor, the kind of fighter that could get you a lot of money?
I'm speculating.
I am. I'm just playing with the idea that maybe Eva Bromicka, upon her return, maybe she doesn't return to the super featherweight division, but so decides to move up to the lightweight division. Lest we forget, Eva Bromicka is a tall drink of water as far as super featherweights go. This is a fighter that could easily fill out to 135 pounds. Probably a better weight for Eva, all things considered.
Better in terms of power?
No, not necessarily power. I don't think that Eva's ever going to be a power puncher. And when it comes to her base style, I think she'll continue to be more of a finesse fighter than anything else. But I mean in terms of actually making the weight. Making 135 for Eva might be a lot easier than making 130.
You ain't gotta cut the extra 5.
You don't have to kill yourself to do it. I imagine that whoever it is, Eva Bromicka is going to be fighting in her very next fight in March on the 13th. It's going to be a lighter touch because she is rebounding off a loss after all. I don't imagine she's going to jump right in there with some killer. And this is a Timex promotion after all, not a Matchroom card. I'm fairly certain, I'm fairly confident that if it was a Matchroom card, they'd make Eva work for her money. I mean, really work for it. Whereas at Timex, Eva's used to having things her way on her terms. Very curious to see what's going to happen in the career of Eva Bromicka moving forward. Best wishes to her, and I'm confident she'll rebound off the loss. It's what she's building towards that I'm more interested in.
Has anybody reached out to fight Terrence Crawford? Has Keith Thurman reached out again to fight him?
Yeah.
Oh, he has. Okay, you're breaking news right now. The whole boxing world is watching right now, Bob. Just want you to know that. How was that conversation with Keith Thurman?
I told her. It wasn't with Keith. It was some representative.
Oh, okay. Okay, we won't. Okay, I don't know who that representative is, but how did the conversation go?
No, he had been in touch with me before.
Uh-huh.
And now he was calling me again. And he said Keith would be interested in fighting Crawford. And I said, well, give me the terms that you want. Let's see if we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a couple of days ago, and I assume I'll hear back from him.
You know, I really was going to stay away from welterweight news, as most of the news that comes out of that division is in reference to fights that are not happening and why. So when I saw this news break that, apparently Keith Thurman has made a second inquiry, rather a representative of Keith Thurman's, has made a second inquiry into a Terrence Crawford engagement, a Terrence Crawford fight. I didn't rush to make a video about it like some others out there.
I don't see what all the excitement is about.
I still don't, because then, like now, it was reported to be Keith Thurman that was making an inquiry into a Terrence Crawford fight, and that was confirmed on the Top Rank side of things. That, Keith did inquire about a Terrence Crawford fight, but the number,
10 mil.
the reported number that he wanted was astronomical, a number that pretty much rendered the situation, the negotiations, a non-starter, $10 million. We talked about it several times here on the channel. But then, like now, it was Keith Thurman making an inquiry. The question was it a hard inquiry? Was Keith Thurman being serious? Because my interpretation of all of that was that it was posturing. And here today, with this situation, I don't know that it's any different. Nothing's changed.
And more time has passed.
With that previous dialogue that Keith Thurman had with Terrence Crawford's people, a big part of the reason that I viewed it as posturing, it wasn't just the dollar amount that, Keith Thurman was reportedly asking for. $10 million up front, that in and of itself led me to believe that this guy's posturing. You can't be serious. You can't be seriously asking for that amount of money during this pandemic if you really want to have this fight. It's going to take compromise in order to make a fight like this happen. And you can't be seriously looking to have this fight and expecting Top Rank to give you $10 million up front. You didn't get $10 million for the Manny Pacquiao fight up front. So why would you get that for Terrence Crawford? There was that to reconcile, but there was also that, Keith Thurman, he hadn't fought and still hasn't fought since the Pacquiao fight. The fight where he lost his title, the fight way back when in July of 2019. Seems almost like ancient history.
That was 17 months ago.
That first dialogue, I talked about how, I wasn't sure if I believed what was being reported. I wasn't sure if Keith Thurman was being serious because it had been over a year since he fought Manny Pacquiao. And
You haven't fought.
you're going to go from losing to Manny Pacquiao straight into a Terrence Crawford fight off a year layoff and surgery to your hand. And that was then. That was, 1 or 2 months ago. Here today, 2-3 months later, it's the same situation. Keith Thurman hasn't fought in about 17 months.
Going on 18.
I mean, this isn't a question of whether or not someone on Keith Thurman's side reached out to Bob Arum. It's a question of, are they being serious? Or is this just a show? Is this just posturing?
We know that somebody reached out to Uncle Bob.
But guess what? That was the situation before. Before we knew that somebody had reached out to Uncle Bob.
We did.
This situation and that situation aren't dissimilar.
Except that now more time has passed.
I mean, that's the only real difference, that more time has passed. Keith Thurman has spent more time away from the ring than when he or one of his representatives originally reached out to the people over there at Top Rank. That's the only real difference. So for me, this is still a question of whether or not I believe that Keith Thurman, off of a 17 going on 18-month layoff and hand surgery, would so decide to fight Terrence Crawford
No tune-up.
in his very next fight. He's going to fight Terrence Crawford after well over a year of inactivity?
With no tune-up fight.
Then, like now, I don't know if I can believe that. I can think of 1 or 2 reasons why Keith Thurman or someone on his side might have so decided to make a second inquiry into a Terrence Crawford fight. Perhaps it was to give the pundits something to write about, something to write articles about, that maybe Keith Thurman is about to fight somebody, but it ain't Terrence Crawford. So in order to get that fight attention, that tune-up fight, what they're going to do is a little bit more posturing.
Make some headlines.
Get Keith some attention, get him back in the conversation while he tunes up with some Sebastian Formella kind of guy.
Because you don't fight Terrence Crawford off a year layoff.
That's the implication here. That's what they're implying. I mean, if you're believing all of this, if you're taking it at face value, all of it, then you then have to believe that, what, Keith Thurman is going to fight Terrence Crawford, his first fight back, off of a 17 going on 18-month layoff? And hand surgery?
With no tune-up fight.
I don't believe that either Keith Thurman or his handlers are that foolhardy that they would throw caution to the wind like that at a time where they can't even really get the kind of money that the fight is really worth because the crowds, they ain't all the way back yet.
These pay-per-views ain't selling like hotcakes.
Even if Keith Thurman really wants to get Errol Spence Jr. in the ring, and he's having a hard time doing that, that does appear to be the case. Even if that's the case, that still don't convince me that Keith Thurman is going to fight Terrence Crawford in his first fight back after 17, 18 months, or however long it takes to make a fight like this.
Right.
Just call it well over a year, close to 2.
Without a tune-up fight.
The often injured, often inactive Keith Thurman is going to dive right into the deep end with Terrence Crawford off of that kind of a layoff in that kind of a situation. Yeah, I find that hard to believe. Even if you don't, I do.
So Bob confirmed that somebody on Keith's side reached out.
I'd like to believe that they were being serious. I'd like to believe that this could result in a fight, this second dialogue, but you'll excuse me for maintaining a certain level of skepticism.
Welterweight division's let me down more than once.
And so has Keith. This isn't how I thought his career was going to go, fresh off of his win over Danny Garcia, that unification match. I never imagined that this is where we would be when it comes to Keith Thurman, but this is where we are. Lost his title to a, 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao, and the bottom line here is, at least for me, those eggs need more bacon. And moving on to a bit of disappointing news for a tweet from Jake Donovan. Being told that Josh Warrington will headline a February 13th show in the United Kingdom. Fight is no longer versus Zhu Can. That title unification bout now eyed for the springtime in the UK, with hopes of taking place with fans in attendance not possible for February. Story to come on, boxing scene. And the BBBOC recently announced that crowds were going to be returning to select locations in the United Kingdom in the month of February.
The middle.
I don't know, I guess perhaps February 13th is a bit too soon, just a smidge. Though I also wonder that the situation with the WBA isn't holding things up as well. Because need I remind you that for some reason, Leo Santa Cruz is still registered as their WBA featherweight champion, and Zhu Can is listed as their regular champion. Leo is the one in possession of the full title, though I don't know why, seeing as it's been over a year since Leo Santa Cruz campaigned as a featherweight.
He hasn't fought as a featherweight since February of 2019.
That's been approximately 2 fights and well over 12 months ago, but for some reason, he's still listed as their WBA regular champion. And the plan was to have Kansu fight Josh Warrington in a unification bout, a unification match, to push the WBA to elevate Kansu to full-fledged WBA featherweight champion, and that hasn't happened yet. I wonder if that's not at least a part of the reason that the match with Zhu Can is being postponed.
It could be.
And perhaps what the people of that matchroom are telling themselves is, let's wait this thing out, let's let a little bit more time pass to see if the WBA won't strip Leo Santa Cruz of that full-fledged title, because it's been a while since he defended it, and it's been a while since he campaigned there, and it may be an even longer while before he returns to the ring, because he just got knocked the fuck out by Gervonta Davis in late October of last year.
Guy ain't coming back no time soon.
That wasn't a cornerman throwing in the towel or a referee stoppage. Leo Santa Cruz was cold slapped by Gervonta Davis. It was a very violent knockout. The kind of knockout that, you might need a little bit more time than usual to recuperate.
So maybe Matchroom's waiting him out.
And maybe that's a part of what the holdup is. They want that Josh Warrington Zhu Can fight to be a unification match. They want 2 alphabet titles to be on the line in that fight. And in order for that to happen, Leo Santa Cruz, he's got to let go of that belt, or the WBA has to take it from him.
Something's got to give.
Something's got to happen, and that's something. It hasn't happened yet. I'm just speculating. I'm just putting it out there. It's just a suggestion that perhaps a part of the reason that the fight is being postponed is because it's not a unification match, and that's what the original plan was.
It's what they wanted it to be.
So let's see if this thing can't happen sometime later on in the year, in the spring, where perhaps there will be 2 world titles on the line. Finally, Kell Brook took to Twitter to respond to Chris Eubank Jr.'s claims of potentially fighting him. He said, "Smack me around for a bit. Only thing you've smacked around for a bit is that silly machine on the wall. Look what happens anytime you've needed footwork and a jab. Talking about a warm-up fight, you and your IBL belt been warming up for years now. Get serious and we can fight." And, I think that Kell Brook's outrage is genuine for what it's worth. I think he feels genuinely insulted that Chris Eubank Jr. of all people, a guy who's never been a full-fledged world champion, a guy who's lost every time he stepped up in competition. I think Kell Brook is genuinely aggravated and insulted that Chris Eubank Jr. refers to him as someone he can smack around for a while. I think he's insulted that Chris Eubank Jr. of all people views him as a warm-up fight when, you know what?
What?
Kell Brook has stepped up in competition more times than Chris Eubank Jr. Kell Brook took on a prime Gennady Golovkin. He stepped up and fought that guy where Chris Eubank Jr. stepped down and stepped off.
That's why Kell Brook's outraged.
That's what Kell Brook is mad about, and in truth, I don't blame him.
How could I?
Chris Eubank Jr.'s got a lot of nerve, a lot of fucking nerve, talking how he's talking. But if I'm being honest, in spite of Kell Brook's outrage, which I think is genuine, I don't think any of this is going to result in a fight. I mean, how many feuds have we seen on Twitter that went on for a while that didn't result in a fight?
Quite a few.
Not every two guys or two girls that trade bobs over social media, over Twitter. Not every set of tweets results in an actual fight, an actual engagement in the squared circle. And at this time, Kell Brook's name is tied to the name of his longtime rival, Amir Khan. I feel that that's actually a more likely engagement could take place than a Chris Eubank Jr. fight.
Even as elusive as that Khan fight has been.
Here today, in 2021, I'd sooner believe that Kell Brook locks horns with his longtime domestic rival, Amir Khan, than he'd travel up there to middleweight, where he clearly doesn't belong, to take on Chris Eubank Jr. over something that Chris said on Twitter.
The guy just got knocked out at 147 pounds.
So he's going to go up to 160 in his very next fight to take on Chris over something that Chris said on Twitter.
Wherever.
Look, this is the sport of boxing, not a schoolyard beef. It is the hurt business, make no mistake, but the hurt's got to make sense. The hurt's got to make sense for both sides. And for Kell Brook, this engagement makes absolutely no sense.
I don't even know why Chris brought him up.
How much credit are you expecting to get fighting Kell Brook off a knockout loss that happened in the welterweight division when you're a middleweight? That's where you're at. How much credit are you expecting to get for fighting Kell Brook?
You want to fight that guy?
Why don't you pick on somebody your own size? There's plenty of middleweights to go around. Why don't you express that same enthusiasm towards fighting Demetrius Andre, WBO champion, somebody like that? You know, why don't you keep that energy for somebody like that, somebody who's more adequately suited to the task than a welterweight who's coming off a loss?
Give me a break, Chris.